I'm a weirdly, really big fan of the Rhino. And, because I'm a huge fan of him, I've been really wanting to draw him lately, but I can't really focus a whole video around one B-list SpiderMan character. Except, for the time I did that with the video that launched this whole channel in the first place. So I figured let's do more Spider-Man characters if they were in the Star Wars universe. Doing some designs and coming up with stories. Giving me the excuse I need to finally draw a variation on Rhino. Also, this thing is so much bigger than I thought it was gonna be when I ordered it. I thought it was gonna be like Pop Funko sized or something. It's a big boy. Anyway, let's get to drawing. Now, admittedly, the Rhino is probably the least Star Wars-y looking out of all of the drawings in this one, but I really like how the drawing turned out, and I took inspiration from some of the droids and from General Grievous, and obviously you can see I had a Mudhorn on screen from that episode of The Mandalorian. But anyway, here's the story that I had for Alexei Sitsevich if he was in, Star Wars. Alexei was a brute of a man. He was a small-time criminal scraping by with what he could steal. Around the start of the Clone Wars, things weren't going well for him. He'd been in and out of jail and was risking being locked up for good if he was caught again. His large stature, well, it helped him in fighting, also made him an easy target and very easy to spot upon fleeing a crime scene. But someone saw use for his size and brutish brawling abilities. By chance, Alexei caught the eye of General Grievous, who saw potential in the brute's strength. Grievous made a deal with Alec. If he agreed to undergo some experiments to enhance his strength and stamina, and fight as Grievous's lackey in the Clone Wars, Grievous would pay the man well, and after the war, he could keep his enhancements, which would really help Alec's crime career. Alec wasn't exactly the smartest man around and didn't even bother asking questions, so he didn't find out ahead of time that the experiments were going to involve grafting cyborg parts to his body that he could never remove. But he didn't even end up being bothered by that. The enhancements turned him into a human battering ram with robotic armor that enhanced his physical abilities and protected him from blaster fire. They hadn't intended to make him animalistic, but with the large steel horn that they put on his head, Alex started referring to himself as the Mudhorn. Inspired by a species he'd heard of as a kid and always thought was cool, but had never actually seen himself. The cybernetic Mudhorn became a formidable foe in the Clone Wars and a powerful asset in Grievous's arsenal. So as mentioned, I was taking inspiration from Grievous and droids and a little bit from the Mudhorn, but not so much. Decided to put a little bit of muddy splotches on him, but they don't even end up looking that muddy, just like a little bit dirty, and I think it looks kind of cool, makes him look scratched up like he's been in more of a fight. Had some trouble figuring out what to do with his face. Ended up going with a bit of droid inspiration, though don't really know how this version of the Rhino sees, but sure, it works out somehow. I'd originally considered giving him a bit of a scowl, but first of all, I just really like characters with a big cheesy grin on their face, and I just picture that Alec is really loving his time just mowing down people in the Clone Wars. This one was a blast to draw, always loved drawing the Rhino, and I hope you all like our cybernetic Mudhorn. Now, of course, we have to do the main man himself, Spider-Man. And I don't know about all you, but I'm really tired of the Uncle Ben dying origin story, so I decided to stay away from that and change up the story a bit more than some of the others, but I think it still works pretty well in the context of the Star Wars universe. Pite Parker didn't know his parents aside from what he was told growing up. As a baby, his family had been on a transport ship when they were attacked by an Imperial fleet for unknown reasons. But Pite always liked to imagine it was because his parents were rebel heroes or scientists. The ship was taken down and crash-landed onto Secundus Ando, where Pite was found as the only survivor. A Harch woman found him and took pity on the boy. She decided to raise him in Harch society, Harch being spider-like aliens. They've shown up in the Clone Wars TV show. Anyway, he was raised in Harch society and was naturally a bit of an outlier. He only had 2 arms and 2 eyes and no fangs, and his inability to climb walls made it hard for him to get around in their society. So growing up, he poured himself into reading and studying, working to become a genius inventor. By the time he was a teenager, he'd managed to build himself gauntlets that allowed him to scale walls the way that the Harch do. He also made goggles for himself that gave him dark vision abilities like the Harch have, and he designed them to look inspired by Harch biology, giving him a little bit of a six-eyed look. But also, around that time, he started to find he had some inherent abilities that nobody else around him had. He could sense things around him, and even, on occasion, found himself able to levitate things. His agility and speed all became near superhuman. Though the Harch are a very reserved society, the woman who raised him, who Pite simply called Auntie, told him about the Jedi and how she believed Pite to be Force sensitive like them. Pite heard the stories of the Jedi's heroic deeds, fighting for the good of the galaxy, and decided he needed to become one. He left home, and despite already being in his teens, he started his Jedi training. He would grow to become a great Jedi, and the inventions he made to fit in with the Harch made him an even more impressive defender of the galaxy. Now, during the process of drawing this one, I was worried that it was a little bit too simple. While there are a ton of really cool Jedi designs out there, the base design elements of Jedi outfits is pretty simple. It's kind of just robes and cloaks. I tried to strip back some of the flowier, cloakier bits and, make it a little bit more superhero skin tighten parts besides some of the baggier pants and the baggier torso bit. I also wanted to work in a little bit of Spider-Man's webbing, but also didn't want to overdo it. And I'd originally thought that I was gonna make the gauntlets and goggles a little bit more rustic, as if they were the versions he'd built as a kid, but then I thought, let's make him a little bit more sleek looking, let's do the older version of the character once he's refined the designs a little bit. And I do really like how this one turned out. It is on the simpler side design-wise, but I think it's fun, and I think the simplicity worked well for this piece. So I hope you all like our Spider Jedi! People who have been following the channel for a while will know this is actually the second episode of Spider-Man characters in the Star Wars universe. The first one was like 3 months ago, and I meant to get to the sequel sooner, but, with so much stuff happening on the channel, 2 videos a week, sometimes I just forget about sequels that I've meant to get to, or old references. Doesn't mean they're gone forever, just, means they've slipped my mind for a while. Anyway, let's get back to drawing. Now, when I was trying to come up with design ideas for Green Goblin in the Star Wars universe, the first thing I did was just Google a list of Star Wars alien species. And obviously, one of the first things to pop up was Yoda's species. And immediately I was like, how did I not think of that? Yoda, basically looks like a Green Goblin. So I went with that and came up with this story for the Star Wars version of Norman Osborn. Yasbo's early life is unknown to most, as his species is pretty clouded in mystery. But by his early adult years, he'd become a very wealthy arms dealer. His company, Yazcorp, made some of the greatest weapons, vehicles, and droids that the Separatist army used during the Clone Wars. But Yazbo was rarely impressed with the ability of droids to get things done. He believed that technology was best utilized by biological hands. In secret, he developed a glider and armor to be worn by living beings in the Separatist army that he believed could help turn the tide of the war in their favor, if they were willing to let more biological warriors go out onto the field. The weaponry he developed is what he considered to be the most impressive technology his company could provide, but the Separatist Council rejected it, electing to stick predominantly with droid technology. Yazbo was appalled by their inflexibility and decided to prove to them just how effective this weaponry was. He made modifications to it to work for his stature and took it out into battle himself. In one battle, Yazbo managed to take out an entire squad of clone troopers on his own, and even managed to kill a Jedi. It was an incredible rush for a man who spent most of his time in labs and boardrooms. He decided to continue fighting as a rogue agent for the Separatists and became one of the toughest enemies to the clone army, matching the brutality of even General Grievous. Now, admittedly, while I've got a speeder bike in there for a reference image and a droideka and some other stuff, I decided to go a little bit more Sith looking with his design, even though he's not a Jedi character. I thought that would be a little bit cooler, and because he is green himself already, like Yoda's species has green skin tones, I decided to give him a little bit more red, make him a bit more menacing, again leaning into that Sith design idea. This is also the first time I've ever successfully done a Green Goblin pose that I really like. It's surprisingly hard getting a, stance on the glider that works well. And I like that it's a little bit angled. We've got smoke trailing off into the back, inspired by the Patrick Brown image that I've got up on screen. He's one of my favorite artists. He's so great. I've mentioned him all the time on this channel. And by the end I was surprised how much I enjoyed the result of this one. I don't know why, but I was a little bit skeptical going into it, and I think it turned out pretty well. So I hope you all like Yosbo. I don't have a good name for him, but someone can name him in the comments. Sandman. He's another Spider-Man villain that I really love. I mean, I love most of Spider-Man's rogues gallery. He's got so many fantastic villains. But anyway, with Sandman, I decided pretty quickly that I was going to do something with the Sand People. Decided that he could be a Tusken Raider, but it took a little bit of tweaking to figure out how to, give him his Sandman abilities. But here's what I came up with. Mariko was born and raised a Tusken on Tatooine. His people isolate themselves from others and are quite hostile to anyone who comes across their land. He was raised simply to protect his people from anyone who would do them harm. At a young age, Mariko started developing abilities that none of his fellow Tuskens had. He could move the sand around him with his mind. He was indeed a near impossible case of a Force-sensitive Tusken. And while he'd never been approached by the Sith or the Jedi, he would use his abilities to be a powerful protector for his people. Not knowing much about the Force, Mariko simply thought that he could control the desert, and only trained in the ability to manipulate sand at will. In battles, he would draw the sand onto his fists and create massive wrecking ball type weapons to batter his opponents. The people of Tatooine, of course, would come to refer to him as a scourge of the desert, and a dangerous monster fighting alongside the Tusken Raiders. But in reality, he was simply an able fighter working to keep his people safe from anyone who might do them harm. The Tuskens are natives of Tatooine, and at the end of the day, they have more claim to the land than anyone else. So, leave them alone, or the Sandman of Tatooine will get ya. Now, I work in a bit more Sandman visuals than really makes sense for a Tusken Raider to be wearing. Sandman's got the classic yellow and green striped outfit. I decided to work that in. I desaturated a lot to make it feel a little bit more like a regular Tusken Raider outfit, and then I give him that pouch strap that a lot of them have. I don't give him one of their weapons because he doesn't really need it. He's got his own built-in weapons. And then, of course, I really wanted to draw him with one giant fist, and I had him leaning over a little bit more than is natural because I figured the weight of that fist would be really pulling him back to one side a little bit, and then also like the idea of having him pulling some sand up from the ground, having it levitate up to his body as if he's about to prepare another giant fist. But yeah, this one, because the Tuskens live out in a very sandy environment, I end up throwing a bit more of a background into this one. Don't know if it really improves it much, but it was pretty easy to do to just add some dunes in the back. And overall, I like how this one turned out. Not my favorite of the video, but it was definitely another fun one. So I hope you all enjoyed Mariko, our Force-sensitive Tusken. Alright, another round of cool stuff as other cool stuff successfully completed. As mentioned, I did a previous episode of Spider-Man villains in the Star Wars universe. I'll link that probably in the cards now. I've also done Batman villains in D&D, Overwatch characters in D&D, Venomized My Hero Academia characters, just a whole bunch of stuff like this. So make sure you're subscribed and got the bell rung to be notified when videos are coming out on Fridays and Mondays. And speaking of Monday's video is going to be a very special episode. I'm doing a collab with someone that I've followed for a very long time and I'm a huge fan of. And if you regularly watch art videos on YouTube, you probably know who he is. But get super excited for that. I will see you all there. I'm Christian Pearson. This has been PopCross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye, everybody.